Welcome. My name's Michael, and today we're going to be doing a webinar that's pretty much on how to raise the self-esteem of our own child. I'm really looking forward to it. I have been for a while, and I know that a lot of parents have been really looking forward to this one because it's an important topic. You know, I'm a dad. I've had a foster daughter for a couple of years. She was 15 when she first came to live with us. I've got two of my own biological kids, and they're quite young. One of them's in school, and I know what it's like as a parent if you feel like, my child just feels down on themselves. They're bad. They're looking them in the mirror at someone who they think is bad and someone who they think is not good enough. And it's a really painful thing for us as parents to be watching that, and it's heart-wrenching, and it doesn't have to stay that way. So today we're going to look at how to raise the self-esteem of our child. Now, this is a different topic from how to raise their confidence. We've covered that in other webinars, and I'm sure we'll do it again. Even though we'll be touching on how to raise their confidence, the focus of this is how to raise their self-esteem. Now, my background, just so you know that what I'm saying, it comes from a bit of experience. Is I've been a school teacher for I think 13 or 14 years, I forget. I've worked with about 1,500 students outside of school in both big improvements tutoring and confidence boost tutoring. So I've done a fair bit with kids, and with those kids who I've worked with outside of schools, I've worked with their parents a lot to try and raise the self-esteem of their kids, to try and raise their confidence, and just to try and bring life to them, trying to get our kids dreaming and hoping again and feeling optimistic. So yeah, that's what today's about. So enjoy. We've had a bit of Q&A happening with people emailing in what their questions were. We're gonna do some Q&A today, which is fantastic. I love it. Let me see. What I'm getting out of these questions is, well, there's a few that we're gonna have to look at. What I'm really getting from these emailed questions is that people are thinking, have I let my own child down? Okay, that's what's coming through so much. Have I let my own child down? Is it my fault? Okay, and I'm hearing, I hear this all the time. Parents saying, I don't spend enough time with my child, or I don't buy them enough stuff, or I don't do enough for them, or I don't drive them enough places. It's like we have this perpetual sense of guilt as parents that we've let the team down. That somehow it's all our fault that our child is struggling, and that doesn't make a lot of sense from the perspective that when our child succeeds, we don't take credit for that. We're like, no, I've got a good kid. I'm happy with that. But when our child struggles, we go, oh, it must be my fault. As a parent, I'm just not good enough. We've got to move past that, because that will actually hinder our parenting. It won't motivate us. We'll just end up with our own poor self-esteem, and then our kids will copy that. So we've got to accept that we are limited resources. We cannot achieve the impossible. We've got a limited amount of time and energy and cash and whatever. We've got a limited amount, and we do the best with what we've got. Okay, so even though that's not what these parents emailed about, I'm hearing it and I understand, because all good parents feel like we could be doing more, but the reality is we're doing the best with what we've got. Okay, now let's have a look at some of these emails. The first one that came in is a mum who's worried about her child's self-esteem. She says that her child has a high self-esteem, but her child has a high IQ, as in quite intelligent, but her child deals with some learning issues, and those learning issues make it hard for her child to have a high self-esteem, or that's her perception of what's happening for her child, which is probably true. I've come to learn to trust mum's judgments pretty much every time. So when you've got a child who's smart, they've got a high IQ, and yet they've got some learning issues. It might be Asperger's that a parent's talking about. It might be dyslexia. It might be, like, there's so many things that a child can have a high IQ and yet be struggling at school, and then that struggling causes them to view themselves poorly. Okay, now that's different from self-confidence. Self-confidence is, can I do it or can I not do it? That's self-confidence. Whereas we're talking today about self-esteem, which is, self-esteem is, am I good enough as a person? Do I have something to offer the world? Or am I just a big fake? Okay, that's sort of what this is looking at. So when that mum sends in that email saying, look, I'm worried about my child's self-esteem, I guess if your child is bright, particularly as they get older and they're going to listen to you less and less, it's really important for your child to be able to separate out who they are from what they do. And we'll probably touch on this a lot today in the self-esteem one. That even as adults, as parents, probably less than half of us actually understand this. You are not what you do. Okay, so I'm a dad. Okay, I even say I am a dad as though that's who I am. No, I'm a person who happens to be a dad, who happens to be married, who happens to be a school teacher. Who am I? I'm a person. Okay, so we need to separate those roles out from who we are. Otherwise, it's going to impact our self-esteem. It doesn't mean we put any less effort into anything else. It just means that we view ourselves as us, but who has these attachments to them. Now, your child who you wrote in about, high IQ, poorly performing at school though because of these learning difficulties, you need your child to be able to separate out, and you can help them with this. You can have this conversation. If your child's really bright, they're going to catch this very quickly, that your child is not a person with learning issues. That's not what they are. That your child is not their report card. Your child is not, I don't know, their learning difficulties. Whatever label, Asperger's or dyslexia or whatever label, your child is not that. Your child is a person who deals with learning issues, a person who has to go to school, a person who does whatever. So when your child understands that, that's the foundation for having a strong self-esteem. Because when you go, hold on, I'm not those things, then you've got the space to go, okay, who am I? Now, this is a conversation that my parents never had with me when I was in primary school or high school. And I wish they had, because I dealt for years with, I guess you'd probably say I had a fairly low self-esteem at some points, largely because I couldn't separate out me from the events I was involved with. Oh, it wasn't I'm Michael who happens to play soccer and missed what would have been the winning goal. It wasn't that. It was I'm Michael who missed the winning goal. And we've got to separate that out. So for your child, you've got to help your child view themselves as who they are. Now, your child can create who they are. Now, I don't say that lightly. Your child can genuinely create who they are, because it's not about, oh, I'm stuck with me, I can't change my learning difficulties or whatever. It's like, whoa, who are you is not defined by those things. Who are you is, what impact do you have on others? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be known as a person of integrity, someone who makes a difference, someone who cares about others? Because you can choose to view yourself that way if you want. Now, how cool is that? How liberating is that? And you and I, as parents, we can't get our child to do this if we can't do that for ourselves. So for me, I have to view myself as Michael, who happens to be a school teacher, who happens to right now be training parents in boosting their child's self-esteem. So for me, my self-esteem is not impacted by whether there's 100 people who watch this or 1,000 or 1,000,000, because I'm Michael who happens to be doing this. Okay, I hope you get what I'm saying, and if you get what I'm saying, you'll find a way to communicate that to your child. Okay, I don't need to go into how you'll communicate that, because when you understand it, you'll want to communicate that to your child. It won't be a one conversation thing. You and I have done this in one conversation. It'll take more than one conversation for your child to get that. Thanks for the question too. Let's have a look. There's another one here. It's the issue of in class, this mum's child just lacks confidence and sort of views themselves as just not good enough, and feels embarrassed in class, embarrassed when they can't do things well. So confidence and self-esteem, they sort of get linked in class, because if you've got low confidence, that will impact your self-esteem, unless you can separate out, I am not my results. Do you know what I mean? Which most kids can't do yet. So this child, they're looking at themselves in the mirror basically and going, well, 6 hours a day, it's a struggle, I'm not much use. Okay, so what we do with a child like that is we need to get them looking past what they can and can't do to what contribution do you want to make. Does that make sense? So whether your child's in year 3 or year 10, you can have that conversation. You can help your child to start dreaming that way. It's not what you can or can't do, and you can't build your self-esteem on your skills or your talents or your lack of talents. It has to be built on what contribution you're going to make. Now, think about this for a minute. At the moment, by the way, this is a major disclaimer. I work at Big Improvements Tutoring and for Confidence Boost Tutoring, okay? So everything I say is through the lens of, I've seen about 1,500 children, pretty much all of whose self-esteem has gone up. And it hasn't gone up just because their school results have gone up. It's gone up because we've helped them view themselves differently from how they view themselves the first time they see us. Now, a big part of that is actually sitting down with that child in that first session when we met them and going, so what's your life all about? What do you want to do with your life? What's your contribution going to be? And kids aren't used to being asked those sort of questions. And so you as a mum or a dad, you can ask those questions and you can say those things. And it's not a conversation you have, face to face, with your teenage son. That's not going to work. Just side by side, just while you're walking, while you're driving, and be like, okay, so what contribution do you want to make to the world? Because everyone's asking our kids, what job do you want to have? Your child doesn't know. And they're probably not going to dream too ambitiously because of a fear of, they've had a lot of setbacks. If you're watching this, your child's probably had a few setbacks. They've had a few setbacks and they don't want to dream big because they fear that if they dream big, then they'll fail. If they fail, they fear that means that they're not good enough, So the question is not what job do you want to have, it's what contribution do you want to make? And any child can tell you that. They can tell you, well, I like people, or I like computers. It's like, okay, you like people. How can you serve people? How can your life make other people's lives better? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a police person? Do you want to be a fire brigade person? How do you want to help people? Or if someone says, I just love computer games. I think computer games are awesome. I just want to create computer games. We want to get them having their eyes off the computer games onto how can I use my passion, which in this case is computer games, to serve people. So it's like, I can create amazing games that bring joy. I can create challenging games that are so challenging and so much fun that it's the highlight of someone's day to play those games. So when we get our kids to start to dream like that, anything can happen. And even a child who says, I don't want to do anything, I just want to play sport. It's like, okay, so how can you in sport be a contribution to others? It might be, you're the captain of the Australian, football team, and the whole world's looking at you, and as captain, you're setting the tone for the rest of Australia. You represent Australia. So if you use your words graciously and well, the whole nation looks good. It could be that, or it could be that your child knows they're never going to captain the Australian football team, but maybe they can be a sports coach, and maybe they can make a contribution to the players that they're working with. Maybe they'll have, they'll be coaching the under-16s when they're my age, and they'll be sort of almost being a dad figure to some kids who need it, or they'll be sort of pulling the kids aside who are just doing the wrong thing at school and going, hey, you're good at footy. What's going on at school? Life's more than just footy. You're worth more than how you're acting. So if our kids can start to dream long term, not in terms of what am I going to do, but in terms of what contribution can I make, that's so pivotal for self-esteem, because then your child is viewing themselves as they're going to be, not just who they are now. Because you and I know if they view themselves as who they are now, they don't have a lot to work with. If you're watching this webinar, then it's just the nature of it, And not just that, you can go and find the top kids in your kids' school, the top athletes, the top academic kids. You talk to them from the heart, if they would open up to you, they would tell you they have a reasonably low self-esteem. They would feel like they're on a treadmill where they always have to perform. That's just the nature of Western schools. It's the nature of Western society, is you're always proving yourself. And that's not fun. And it doesn't give you fulfillment, and you can't base a self-esteem on it. In fact, I'm thinking about this now, I'm like, how many mums or dads are watching this thinking, yeah, that's me at my workplace. Well, you can't build your self-esteem on your workplace. You can only build your self-esteem on who you choose to be, and on what contribution you want to make. And crazy stuff. Let's have a look at some more questions. Got quite a few here. Now, I guess another one of the questions that came through was another one of the questions that came through. I've just got to find it. There it is. Pretty much, how do we restore self-esteem when it's been lost? Okay. Well, good question. Obviously, I'd go back to what I said before. If you are not, what happened to you? Okay. So when someone's saying self-esteem's been lost, it could be bullying, it could be, their self-esteem got knocked around during a family breakup or something like that. When self-esteem's been lost, usually there's events that have happened, such and such happened at school, the teacher laughed at me, the kids laughed at me, something happened, is separating themselves out from I'm not what happened. What happened were events. I'm the person who happened to be there when the events happened. Okay. And we want our kids to be able to view it as a temporary thing, because when kids view challenges as perpetual, they're always going to be there. I'm never going to break out of this. That's when they start to get hopeless and a bit dark, and not a good place for our kids. So we need our kids to view tough times as something that's temporary and something that they will grow through. Okay. So they're going through a tough time. The tough time will only last for a certain period of time, and then they'll come through the other side stronger and with new skills, and then they'll be able to help others with those skills they got. Again, do you see how it's focused on how can I contribute? Okay, so much of the self-esteem stuff just comes back down to how can I contribute? So the question of how do I repair things? Yep, have the conversation with the child, make sure that the child's separating what happened from who they are. But then also look for some ways for your child to make positive contributions to others. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about self-esteem, they'll talk about, then your child needs to have some successes. And that is true. Okay, that is clearly true. Your child having some successes will boost their self-esteem. But it's not the successes that last for their self-esteem. The successes will only be a temporary boost of self-esteem from what I can tell. The long-term impact on self-esteem is when your child is actually making a contribution to others. So, man, I know that not everyone says that. I know that that's probably not a very, that's not a view that everyone's going to put out there for you. But I'm telling you straight out, with big improvements tutoring and with confidence boost tutoring, I've worked with 1,500 kids I've almost never seen it fail. Get our kids thinking outside themselves. As soon as they're focused on themselves, they're not winning. As soon as they're focused on others, they're not even thinking about their own self-esteem. They're just thinking, how can I serve? How can I contribute? How can I make a difference? Suddenly self-esteem goes right up straight away, very quickly. Okay. Now, another question that came through, let me track it down. Another question that came through was, okay. Actually, before I go on to that, another thing that people like these questions. I mean, I'm sort of summarizing some of these questions. One of them is, how do you talk to your child when they've really messed things up badly? Okay, and pretty much it's being clear with your child. You are not your choices. You are not your school marks. You are not what happened. You are you, and here were your actions. And you want to work out, is that what I want to keep doing? Do I like the consequences of doing this? Or do I want to change my actions and have different consequences, easier, happier ones? Really helpful stuff. I guess another thing that's come up through these questions is I'm hearing that a lot of parents, they want their kids to have a high self-esteem. And I think the place that comes from is that we as parents have not always had a high self-esteem. And we've experienced what low self-esteem feels like, and we don't want that for our kids. Because when we've got a low self-esteem, we know how bad we feel, and we love our kids. We don't want them to experience pain. I get that. Now, we need to actually have a genuinely high self-esteem if we're going to model a good self-esteem to our kids. So it doesn't make sense for me to be trying to put things in place for my child to have a great self-esteem if my self-esteem is shot to pieces. Okay, so part of the solution for this is, I don't want to use the word solution lightly. It's not a solution, it's a process. Part of the process is we need to have high self-esteem. We need to be separating out our actions, our choices, our life circumstances from who we are as a person. We need to be separating as adults who we are, not from, we need to be not viewing ourselves as our actions or what we do, but we need to be looking at how do I want to contribute, looking for ways to make that happen, because if we can get our eyes off ourselves onto others, that'll lift our self-esteem. And I think as parents, we have a lot of opportunity to do that naturally anyway, but we can look beyond just that. How can I contribute to my community? What can I donate to? Like, what's a cause that matters to me? And doing it that way. If we can lift our own self-esteem, our kids are going to view how we're viewing ourselves healthily. Our kids will view that as normal, and then they're more likely to emulate that, to copy it. Something else that I'm saying is, when it comes to self-esteem, people confuse forgiveness with an acceptance. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of the time parents or teachers are sort of saying to kids, you should put up with that low-level teasing. You should be okay with it. You shouldn't make a big deal of it. Just walk away. And in one sense, on a practical level, that works. In the long term, it's true. That's a good way of dealing with some low-level teasing or whatever. But in the longer term, we also need to keep in mind that it's not okay that people are disrespecting you. Okay, you don't have to confront everyone who's disrespecting you. Imagine you and I doing that in our workplaces. That would not work too well, obviously. So you don't want to actually have your child confronting every situation of disrespect, but we do want our kids to know as they walk away from it that what happened back there is not okay. I'm actually not okay with being spoken to like that. I may not confront it, but I know I'm worth more than what they said. Because it's not okay for us to accept that as valid. It's not valid that you were spoken to like that. It's not valid that you were treated like that. And you may not take actions to do something about it, but you've got to know in your own heart that it's not valid and that you're actually worth more than that. Okay, and that brings in the question of acceptance and forgiveness. Like forgiveness is when you say, you know what, I am worth more than how I was treated, but I choose to not continue to stew over this and hold this against them and seek revenge and all that stuff. But I know what I'm worth. But that's forgiveness. Whereas sort of acceptance is, oh, I'm not going to deal with it because I'm not important enough. I'm not valuable enough to deal with it. Which sounds ridiculous when I say that, and yet that's almost a message that our kids pick up, and that's not a message that's good for their self-esteem. Bit of a side note. Okay, let me just have another look through some of these questions. You know what? A little girl, this is from a girl in kindergarten, actually said this. She says, sometimes when I don't get what I want, I get angry at myself. Okay, so that brings in the question of negative self-talk. If a kindergarten girl is able to say, I get angry at myself, you can have that conversation with a kindergarten girl. You can have that conversation with a child in year 3 or grade 7. Do you know what I mean? So the self-talk that our kids have, when they mess up badly, are they saying, oh, I messed up badly? Or are they saying, oh, I'm no good? Do you see the difference? One is, I'm a person who has made some errors. Another is, I never get things right, as in I'm broken. Do you see how that works? So we really want to get our kids having positive self-talk, speaking well about themselves. It's okay to seriously stuff things up badly, and sometimes I stuff things up badly. One of the technology things I had to do for a previous webinar just did not go to plan. But then at the end of it, I didn't go, oh, I am worthless because I couldn't make some buttons work. I didn't do that. I went, well, I tried to make something work. It didn't succeed. Pity, but it's not a reflection on me. It's just I had to learn how to use something properly. And so getting our kids, when you hear your child say, like I hear this sometimes with one of my own kids. She says, oh, I'm no good. I never get anything right. And I'm like, whoa, what do you mean never get anything right? I'm, this thing that you try to do stuffed up, but don't say things that aren't true, So we need to be trying to persuade our kids to speak well of themselves. And part of that comes down to they're watching you and I, how we speak about ourselves. Like if I'm in the kitchen and I drop a glass and smash it, do I say, oh, I'm such an idiot? Which would be a pretty common thing for a parent to say. But then when our kids see that, they go, oh, when you make mistakes, you're an idiot. If I drop a glass and my kids are around, I know I can't afford to say, for their sake, I can't afford to say I'm an idiot. I need to say, whoops, that was a big accident, or that was a terrible mistake. I've got to disassociate me from the actions. Hope that makes a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure it does. How you convey that to your child, though, only you know it's going to work. I do know it'll take a few conversations. It's not going to happen in a day because your child didn't get these attitudes in a day, so it's going to take a while to undo those attitudes that have been there for quite some time. Another question someone's asked is, how do I break my child out of a negative spiral of self-talk? Pretty much what I was describing. You got to model it, you got to show them how it's done, but then when you're seeing them be angry at themselves, attacking themselves with their words, you have to intervene because you're the adult. You got to say, hey, that's not okay. That's not even the truth. Don't say that about yourself. Here would be a more accurate way of viewing it. Another one here about self-esteem after bullying. If your child's experienced some some bullying, particularly long-term bullying. It's really damaging for kids to experience long-term bullying because they stop feeling safe and they start viewing themselves as the peer group views them, which is as a failure. And it's a hard thing to do. While the child's in that ongoing bullying situation, it might just be words, or it might be more than that. While that situation's happening, that child will have a low self-esteem. So that situation must change. So you must bring that to the attention of the school. And if they don't respond well, if they're not interested in solving it, then just keep going up the levels, to the deputy principal, to the principal. Go above the principal's level if need be. But you cannot let your child stay in a bullying situation and think they'll have a good self-esteem, because it's just not going to happen. It's not compatible. Now, the question of how do I restore self-esteem after bullying? Again, we've got to get our child separating who they are from the events. Okay, so I am a person. I experienced situations of bullying. It wasn't fun. Not I was a victim of bullying. As soon as you use the word victim, you've declared that their value is somehow lower. It's not helpful to do that. We need them to go, well, I'm a person. I have worth and value, and that worth and value wasn't respected by this person on this day. And there might be a lot of people on a lot of days, but that's the goal of how to move them forwards beyond the bullying. Man, I'm trying so hard to fit so much of this stuff into such a short period of time. And yet there's just so many questions here that people have sent in that are all worth looking at. Another question from I'll bet this is a mum. I can't tell from the email address. She says, what am I doing that's hurting my child's self-esteem? And, how can I tell what actions I'm doing that's hurting my child's self-esteem? And rather than answer that question head on, I'll actually ask you a better question, which is, why do you feel like it's your fault if your child has a low self-esteem? Because I think that's what's underlying that question you asked. If your child has a low self-esteem, it's not your fault. You can contribute to helping them raise their self-esteem, but the hard yards they've got to do, and it's a team effort. It's not just you. It's also school. It's also your partner. It's also how extended members of the family relate to your child. It's not just you. So maybe cut ourselves some slack on that, not be too hard on ourselves. But I think the actual question, though, is answered by other parts of this webinar. I think it's got to come down to your child, for them to have high self-esteem. There's two main things I can think of that just hit all these questions I've been asked. The first is for your child to work out who they declare themselves to be. Okay, you could make that say, oh, what's their identity? That word has been thrown around so much, it's lost meaning. It's not even who's my identity. It's so many messages. That was actually my phone though. It was, the question was, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, who do you declare yourself to be? Okay, so when you know who you are, it's not, oh, I'm good at soccer. No, that's my skills. It's, who am I? What contribution do I make? Okay, who do you declare yourself to be? Like, just putting it in adult speak, you can make it your own child speak. I am a person, my name is Michael, I'm a person who represents integrity and making a difference to others. I'm a dad, I'm a husband. They don't define who I am, but they do mean that as a dad, I want to feed into my kids and put good things in them. As a husband, again, that doesn't define me, but it does mean that I want to be someone who's valuing and respecting and treating my wife really well, raising her, everything I can do that raises her enjoyment of life, because she matters to me. I love her. So who am I? I'm a person with integrity. I'm a person who is loyal. I'm a person who is faithful. I'm a person who stands by his word, all that stuff. That's who I am. And when I declare that to be true, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday or last year or last decade. That's who I'm going to be going forwards. So when I'm looking at myself in the mirror, that's who I'm seeing. Now, if we can get our kids to do that, well, they're not going to use words like integrity or faithful or whatever. But if our kids are putting themselves in the mirror and going, here's who I'm going to be, here's what I choose to stand for, how cool is that? How cool is that? And that's what it comes down to for raising their self-esteem. Guys, we are we are pretty almost out of time. Here's the thing. I will put in a plug for Big Improvements Tutoring and for Confidence Boost Tutoring, because what they do there massively changes kids' lives. The truth is, a lot of you guys watching are going to be overseas, or you're not in Sydney and Canberra and wherever else Big Improvements Tutoring is, or Confidence Boost Tutoring. So the take home for you guys is your child's self-esteem. You can do so much, but you can't do it the way that the media or the whole world has been telling you to do things, because it doesn't work. What works is helping your child work out who they choose to be for the future, and helping your child work out what contribution they're going to make in the long term, and making sure that's a regular conversation in your house. And then if things are way off track, wrecking self-esteem, like really like bullying that's been ongoing, you got to fix it. Your child won't have a high self-esteem while that's there. Learning issues that are unaddressed, I'm not talking about the child who's got all the support around them. I'm talking about the child who's got learning issues that aren't really being catered for. You've got to address that. Until that child feels successful at school, it's going to be very hard for them to have a high self-esteem. If your child is just looking in the mirror at a whole series of failures because they haven't had someone talk through with them and separate out who am I from what happened. Until they can separate that out, they're going to struggle with low self-esteem. But there's so much that we can do. And the other thing was, we as adults, we need to model a high self-esteem. We need to show our kids what a high self-esteem is. And we need to make sure that we're not just putting stuff in place for our kids, but we're actually living it out ourselves, because they'll absorb our values. But look, all the best to you. I hope I see you around sometime at Big Improvements Tutoring or Confidence Boost Tutoring. And when you see the amazing things that we do with kids there, you'll know why self-esteem is so important to me. But if you live overseas or something, I never see you. All the best. Give it your all, and feel free to send me an email. All right, catch you guys later.